Yes,
Hello, and welcome to the In the Tank podcast episode. Forget which one it is. Donnie, you take it. You take it, Donnie.
We're talking about the DNC. We're talking about blackouts in California, and maybe another Elon Musk topic if we have time on episode 257 of the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. Joining us today, we've got editorial director Justin Haskins. What's up, sir?
Not much. Good to be with you guys.
Isaac Orr, you were not with us last week. You're a research fellow at the Center of the American Experiment. How are you, good sir?
Good. Howdy doody, everybody.
That's classic Isaac. Jim Lakely, VP of Heartland Institute. What's up, sir?
How are y'all doing? Are you as worried about the scandal with the post office and how Trump's going to steal the election like a lot of idiots on Facebook are?
Yes.
Well, I've heard
I'm terrified
that everyone is a huge fan of the post office. Everyone loves the post office now, which is kind of news to me. I actually had no feelings towards it at all.
My mail carrier never takes the outgoing mail. It's like a chore just to get them to take the letter. I got to walk to the mailbox. It's 2020. Come on, people. Let's innovate.
Trump stealing blue mailboxes off of street corners to steal the election might be the dumbest conspiracy theory yet, but it sure is entertaining.
Yeah, well, it's fun stuff.
I don't get it. It's like they can't figure out another way to send mail if he takes it.
It's like
there's plenty of ways to do it.
Yeah, that's true because, in theory, unless your mail carrier is not good at their job as mine, you could just put it in your mailbox and put up a little flag and they'll take it away from you. So
or just walk into the post office.
There you go.
Actually go into the post office. I don't understand. What is so complicated about this? Just go into the post office. You walk in the door, there you drop it off.
Was this conspiracy theory addressed at the DNC over the last few days?
So I think so. I don't know if it was directly, but there was numerous instances where they talked about stealing the democracies, stealing the election, all these things about stealing, and I don't know what else that could be other than the Postal Service thing. I don't know what else they could. Maybe it could be the Russian collusion thing. I don't know. They have so many conspiracy theories. It's hard to keep them all straight.
Yeah, I chose not to watch any of it. I know that Jim brought up that he wanted to talk about it, so I was going to open the floor to you. Justin, I know that you were forced to watch a lot of the DNC. Is there anything worth talking about, or should we just gloss over it? What do you think?
What do you say, Jim?
Well, no, I mean, Justin, actually, I haven't watched a lot of it. I've watched clips. You've been actually forced through your job to have to, watch actual hours. I mean, how many hours of it have you watched over this last? Because you are one of the few people watching because the ratings are in the toilet. There are literally thousands of people who watched Hillary Clinton give her speech online the other day.
Yeah, and what's funny about that is that I'm convinced that most of those people are reporters or opinion writers or something like I am, because I had to record it. And because I had to record it and because of the it's a long story, but the bottom line is I had it on 3 TV sets at my house at one time. So at least 3 of the several hundred views for the DNC convention are mine. So I don't know. It was, to be honest, it's one of the most horrible things I've ever seen for a variety of reasons. But the main reason is it's boring. That's the main reason. Above all else, it's boring. And so the one thing that I think, if you're going to take away anything from the DNC convention, it's that literally no one has been won over. Not a single human being has been won over by this convention. Not one. In fact, they probably lost people. The DNC convention, bump, there's usually a convention bump after this, and the polls after you have a convention, it's pretty standard. I think this time around, there's a real possibility that this thing will plummet, that they will be just absolutely wiped out by their own convention if anybody watched it. And thankfully for them, I don't think anybody did, but it's horrible.
I thought there was some strategy to it. I mean, they had Bill Clinton go on before Biden, and I think that was just to make Biden look good by comparison. So, I mean, they've got some strategy going.
Yeah, but they had Bill Clinton go on after Caroline Kennedy, who spent the last part of her address talking about how great Joe is for women, and then they bring on the guy who raped all these women. Like, that wasn't a very good strategy, I don't think. Did anyone think that one through? I don't think so. So I mean, when I look at it, I don't know. And Bill Clinton was like half dead. He was barely alive. It was a Weekend at Bernie's situation for Bill. So, I mean, seriously, parts of this convention felt like you were watching a live stream of an old folks' home. That's what it felt like. And it was Jimmy Carter, because Jimmy Carter was right before that. We had Jimmy Carter, who is barely alive. We have Bill Clinton, who is also barely alive. We've got like people who are accused of sexual assault all over the place. We've got, it's just pure madness. We've got socialists. We've got everything. It is literally a left-wing freak show, except boring. It's which is incredible. They really did find a way to strike that nice balance between absolutely insane and watching paint dry. Yeah. It was difficult to do, but they did it.
Well, I've heard it described as like the world's worst, history's worst PBS pledge drive.
Yeah.
That, with Zoom calls for more excitement, and for more interaction.
Which makes sense because PBS is government. So yeah, I mean, it all fits. But even PBS doesn't have a tendency of throwing like alleged rapists up there, So I mean, you got to at least hand it to them on that one. It was just terrible, and then it was full of lies on top of it. It was just full of the lying. I mean, look, I know it's convention and whatever, politicians, they lie all the time. But the lying this time around is just, they are taking it to Olympic champion level lying in this convention. At one point, they accused Trump of putting Obama, for instance, last night accused Trump of putting children in cages when in fact, Barack Obama is the one who built those cages.
He didn't build that.
Yeah, he built those cages, that's for sure. Then there was another point in time. They've all accused him of stealing democracy, whatever the heck that means. They have repeatedly have made the accusation that Donald Trump wants to take away everyone's health care in the midst of a pandemic, which is just ridiculous. When has Donald Trump ever said that he's going to take away everybody's health care? Because he's suing to get rid of Obamacare, but he doesn't want to get rid of Obamacare and then not replace it with anything. His plan is not just to get rid of Obamacare and have all these people with no health insurance. It was just like one misleading comment after another throughout the entire night. It was one night after another. I mean, it's just brutal. It's absolutely brutal.
So I watched 90 seconds of it. It was literally AOC's 90 seconds that I watched.
Which was so disappointing, by the way.
I know. Well, I only watched it because I had a friend text me and said, like, oh my gosh, she endorsed Bernie Sanders. And for like a minute, I thought that like there was a coup happening and they were going to steal it from Joe Biden or something, until I found out that it was like a procedural thing and it was totally normal for that type of stuff to happen. So for like a little bit, I was excited. So I listened to her thing. And so my only takeaway is that she didn't mention global warming, climate change at all. Like, was that shocking to you, Jim? I mean, this thing that like we're all dead in like 10 years if we don't solve this global warming thing. It doesn't even get a mention from Mrs. Green New Deal.
Give it time. I mean, it's one crisis after the other. It's like they just keep topping each other or topping themselves with crises. I mean, first it was global warming was going to kill us all, and now it's COVID, and now it's Trump just by existing, and now apparently the stealing of blue mailboxes on corners is going to be the end of us all. It's like this. The left requires crises to survive, or actually to get you to try to trick people into supporting them. There can never be a normal world. It can never be a normal life. Everything, even in the best of times when the left is in power, they try to make everything seem terrible. It's such a contrast. Going back to, we talked a little bit about Reagan on the last podcast, since I was alive back then. I'm not Weekend at Bernie's old, but I'm old. I'm older. I remember Reagan, and he always put forth this very optimistic message, right? I mean, it was Morning in America again for his 1984 reelection campaign. He was always talking about the greatness of America and the goodness of the American people, and that us pulling together. This convention, in the clips that I've heard, and I listened to Barack Obama's very, very dark speech, you know, they describe a world that I think most people don't recognize. They describe a country that most Americans do not recognize. And, you know, Trump has a lot of flaws, and he from his style on the stump to the thing coming out of his mouth to his Twitter feed to lots of things. But there's one thing that is pretty clear, that Donald Trump actually loves America, and he loves, you know, and he appreciates his voters. All of his ire and vitriol is really directed at the media or the hard left in this country, and people that are working against what he sees as the goodness of America. He actually believes in the goodness of America. And it's going to be really interesting, I think, when the Republicans have their turn next week in their convention, what the tone of their messaging is going to be. Because as Justin, as you pointed out, it is a parade of just panic and misery and negativity coming out of this. And maybe that's what the Democrat base needs to get out there. But it sure isn't very inspiring for, as you said, it's probably not changing many minds, because I think a lot of independent voters are wondering what country these people are talking about.
Yeah, well, to be perfectly clear, as Barack Obama would say, let's be clear.
Let me be clear. Let's be clear.
Let's be clear.
Hey, everybody. Want to shoot some hoops after the convention?
I did not say that it won very few people over. I said it won literally 0 human beings over. I could not have been clearer. There is no one. There is literally not a single person. It's negative. They've lost people. That's what I just want to correct the record, because if there is no way anyone was won over by this, absolutely no one. It was so boring and so weird and agonizing and just the, you know, I didn't think that it would matter that much going into it, that there would be no crowd. But it turns out that when you don't have a bunch of mindless idiots nodding around and clapping every time you say something, it turns out that you realize how stupid these people are a lot easier. So it was so boring, so low energy. I don't know. It was awful.
Jim, so I haven't watched any of these DNC things in the past. So just kind of some of this stuff is like first time for me. So I don't know what's normal. But you sent a couple of clips that I want to play, or I want you to tee up here. So what is this? Are these like side panels? Is this going on throughout the day? Are there multiple rooms? Like, how does this work?
There are multiple rooms. It's virtual.
It's virtual.
Sessions, multiple sessions, all right?
Yeah. So this is so I actually covered the Republican National Convention in 2004 in New York City. And you know what the public sees on television is just the speeches, you know, in prime time, the big speakers they get to put up there. But there's actually a lot of activity going on, you know, all day long. I mean, these are the party apparatchiks, or the party faithful, to be a little bit more kind, from all over the country. You got county commissioners, you got city council people, you have elected congressmen, state legislators, all these people, you know, they come together as a party because, you know, the purpose of these conventions, you know, back before really the primary system, was to literally get into a smoke-filled room and pick who was going to run for president. We don't do it that way anymore. But you know, it's a very serious week for the serious party people. And so a lot of things they do is they get together once every 4 years and really start to hammer out what the agenda is going to be and what they want their message for the party to be. And really they start to envision what the future will be if we are brought into power. And so a lot of that was still going on, and it was going on online, and it was being streamed out to the world during the day when nobody was watching. Well, some people were watching, and they caught these things. So there's this clip was going on over Twitter, so we can I'll share the screen here. And this is, you know, I would say a pretty accurate window into who runs the Democratic Party now and what they want to do to the country.
Because we understand that this future that we all want, that we're all trying to build, really is about the destruction of colonization, white supremacy, and capitalism. We must really move away from these systems and these frameworks if we really want to live in a future that does have a regenerative economy and does enable liberation and equity for our communities. This is definitely something that we all want to push forward. And so our hope and our dream is that we do forward Green New Deal. We do understand that, you know, there is the Green New Deal, the AOC marquee policy that many of us have become accustomed to, but also realizing that on the state level, many different policies are being pushed forward that do relate to the Green New Deal, that are collectively moving forward into this regenerative economy and this regenerative future. And really our position is that the Green New Deal and its policies, we're moving toward this way anyway.
Yeah. You know, the Green New Deal is moving towards the destruction of capitalism. Nicely put. Nicely put there. Yeah, you know, it's funny if you play that first like 15 seconds again, the person on like the bottom right corner, she's nodding along. Yeah, destruction of colonial or white supremacy, and then she's nodding along, and it's like, and capitalism, and she just like and stops. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna be on board with that one, but
yeah, these people, look.
Well, wait. Before you go into your generalization about all these people, let's play one more clip, Jim. Pull up that other one if you have it handy.
I do.
But yeah, it's just like at some point these, like, yeah, I'm not going to filter myself at all. So here's another one of these little side panel type things.
Yeah.
This guy's got more flat rainbow flags behind him than a gay pride parade. Look at that. He's got like a million of them back there.
I can't hear this one.
Why can't folks imagine a world without the cops? Why can't folks imagine a world without prisons? Why can't people expand their imagination?
I can't really hear this one.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
She's basically saying, you know, why can't people imagine a world without cops? Why can't people imagine a world without prisons? She calls for, or sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna get a check against me on the internet. They call, you know, I got to get the pronouns right. They called for the complete abolishment of the police, the complete abolishment of the prison system, and the complete abolishment of ICE. I think that's what it was. So it's just like, yeah, they're not hiding it anymore.
Why can't folks imagine a world without cops? Why can't folks imagine a world without prisons? Why can't people expand their imaginations to include community care, to include an abolitionist future? I'm talking about like for real abolition, not just watered down DNC version of abolition. We're talking about abolishing the police. We're talking about abolishing ICE. We're talking about abolishing prisons.
Yeah, that's it. No watered down thing on the convention that I'm speaking on behalf of right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so Justin, you can kind of go along, but it's just like we've gotten to a point where people can only nod along. They can't push back against any of this craziness, or else they'll be labeled as one of these bigots too. You know. So yeah, Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, I look. What you're seeing on that clip there is the future of the Democratic Party in like 5 years, maybe 10. That's it. That's the future.
I was thinking like next cycle.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I mean, it's going to be that. We're going to have AOC running for president soon. Like, we can look forward to that. Like, that's the future of the party, is these lunatics talking about the abolition of like what does it even mean? First of all, what the heck is a regenerative economy? What does that mean? What does that mean? What does it mean to be a regenerative economy? Does she mean, I mean, they destroyed the economy. Did she forget that part? That
the grasses will get greener, the trees will grow again, the water will get fresher. I don't know.
Like what does that even mean? I mean, there's so much garbage here. And then abolish. Look, the reason that people don't want to abolish the police and get rid of prisons isn't because there's a lack of imagination. Like, I can imagine that. Yeah, I can imagine that. It's called hell. It's called Mad Max. That's what it's called. It's Escape from LA, right? Like all these scenarios, we've lived them out. Hollywood has imagined this all the way through. It's awful. It's terrible. Right. Like almost every Batman movie has a prison break at some point. So we know what it's like. Yeah. I mean, we've seen it. We know what it's like. It's not that I can't imagine it. It's that I don't want it. Like, don't you get it? We don't want it. We want prisons for people who commit crimes. Like, I don't know. In their world, what do you do when, say, I don't know, someone rapes a kid? What do you do? What do they go? What, they go to a therapist, a social worker? Like, how does this work? There's no prison. So I don't understand. What do we do with these people? Are they suggesting that people won't commit any more crimes anymore if we don't have police? I mean, is that the logic?
If we have a regenerative economy, then people won't crime anymore. They won't crime. No more crimes.
See, yeah, that's it. It's like all of the systemic problems are what cause crime, not criminals.
That's right. That's right. So,
but see, Justin, this isn't the future of the Democratic Party in 5 years. Or in the next cycle, 4 years from now. These are the party leaders. This is what they're getting together to talk about. This is the Democratic Party right now. This isn't just a radical agenda. This is a revolutionary
They still
agenda.
have their geriatric gatekeepers, though. Like, as much as we don't,
nodding in the corner of it.
We're gonna
for
look
the
back,
last time. Like,
Nancy Pelosi is gonna be like this moderate. You know, like when she actually was critical of the Green New Deal, like she's basically a Republican in 5 years.
Yes, it is inconceivable that Democrat Party people would speak like this in public just 4 years ago.
Yeah,
they didn't talk like this when Hillary was running for president. They didn't talk like this, obviously, all through the Obama administration. Even the most liberal / left candidates in the Democratic Party over the years, from Hubert Humphrey forward, in the 1960s forward, never would have spoken like this openly. This is as if the Weather Underground wasn't just rioting outside the Chicago convention in 1968 for the Democrats, but that the Weather Underground was setting the agenda and writing the platform for the Democratic Party in 1968. These people, these are that's why I wanted to play those clips, guys, because this is actually what's happening. You know, Kamala Harris's speech and Obama's speech and Joe Biden's speech, all this stuff, that's boilerplate stuff. And, there are hundreds of thousands of people watching it online, but almost nobody's watching these things. But this is what the Democratic Party stands for now. They are out front with their radical Marxist agenda, with doing things that would be so destructive. It's basically Portland for the world, Portland for the United States, because that's what happens when you don't, when your district attorney doesn't want to prosecute anybody pulled off the streets for rioting, when they want to empty all the prisons because of COVID, but really it's because they want a lot of criminals on the streets, because they think that the prison system is racist, unjust, and needs to be dismantled. And yeah, Justin, what are they going to replace it with? Apparently nothing, because you can't fix this on the front end and then just live in this utopia. These people are unhinged, they're crazy, and they're Marxist, and this is the agenda they want for the United States. And this needs to be talked about.
So the person in that last clip calling for the total abolishment of all of those things, according to that person's bio, Jay Mai is a Black Vietnamese, transgendered, non-binary, gender transcendent mermaid queen king, currently living out their ever-evolving truths in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So she's probably neighbors with Justin over there.
Yeah.
And
say go by and say hello.
And B, that person is probably presidential material in a few years.
I've got a question.
They are already royalty, obviously.
Right. And that's really what I want to know is what kind of spread do you put out for a mermaid she queen? I don't know. I don't know. What do I provide? What do I do?
They'll explain that.
Crackers? Is that?
It's got to be vegan. It's got to be vegan, right?
You would think so, but I don't know.
They'll explain that at the next DNC. So all of these things, just crazy things are out there, and people are afraid of being labeled some type of bigot, right? So they just sit there and nod along. And I really think that this is something that we have seen. I was doing a little bit of writing and research into climate change recently. And one thing that I noticed is that there was several over the past few years, several news stations or shows that were very out there with their, talking about how they're not going to let in any climate deniers on. So the BBC, Meet the Press, whoever guy does Meet the Press for NBC, and CNN all had like statements talking about how they're not going to give platforms to climate deniers. So you got these people that are going on there and just saying outrageous stuff about climate change, and nobody wants to be grouped in with these climate deniers, so they just nod along. So this is kind of the world that we're in now. And what that results in is real life impacts like we're seeing playing out in California. What do you think about that segue,
That
Mr.
was
Isaac?
amazing.
Yeah, pretty good. So I got a few articles that are talking about these California blackouts. One of them is written by our very own Isaac Orr, writing for the Center of the American Experiment. Millions of Californians lose electricity due to cloud cover and low wind speeds. So Isaac, kind of give us some background on this. What's going on in California?
Yeah, so long gone are the days where Jed Clampett and Granny moved to California after striking black gold in the hills of Tennessee. We used to watch Beverly Hillbillies all the time. My mom taped them, and we'd watch them.
Great.
So great show, great concept. But yeah, so basically what happened is it got real hot in the Southwest or West United States, in Arizona, Nevada, California, and all the other states were fine because they're just like, oh, well, I guess we better have enough like coal, nuclear, or natural gas power plants to make sure in case people, want to use air conditioning that the power won't go out. But in California, that didn't happen because California said, nuclear, gross. Natural gas, bad for the climate. So It got real hot. And so the thing that's happened with California over the last decade is they've been shutting down their nuclear power plants. They shut down a huge nuclear power plant, and they replaced it with solar and wind, or they replaced it.
Yeah.
So they also shut down a ton of natural gas because gross. Right. So the temperature went up. It's the damnedest thing. People want to use their air conditioning when it gets hot out.
Right.
And too many people were using their AC, and it was cloudy. So they actually had rolling blackouts where 2 million people lost power last weekend.
Yeah, just because they didn't have enough energy being produced in the state.
Correct.
What century are we in, man?
Low energy California.
Low energy California. Yeah, and this was almost controlled blackouts, right? They were sending around, they had the commercials running telling people to keep their windows closed and their shades drawn. And
they knew that they weren't going to have enough energy. And if you run short on energy, that can cause a whole system failure. So rather than have the entire system go down, they black out 240,000 homes at a time for an hour or two, and then they roll that blackout to another area. So that's where you get the term rolling blackouts. So that's essentially what California had to do last Friday and Saturday, and they thought that they were going to have to do this Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They actually thought they were going to have blackouts all week, but they got lucky that people were willing to turn their AC up to 80. And they also got a whole bunch of industrial companies, manufacturers to not run at all.
Oh my gosh.
So that's great for the economy, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna tell people we're gonna have blackouts if you try to do your job, so you better not do it.
That is so bizarre, man. Yeah, I can't even believe it.
They have a word for it though, or a phrase for it. It's called demand response. So all these lunatic environmentalists have this concept that we don't need to have enough power plants for everybody to generate as much electricity as anybody could want. All we have to do is convince people to not use electricity. And that's called demand response. So
Genius.
Great.
It's the opposite of Tom Bodett in Motel 6. It's demand response. We'll turn the lights off on you.
Yeah, I know. People are going to be hungry, but we don't have to make more food. We just got to convince people not to eat.
Right.
Basic cake. See,
Americans are morbidly obese, so maybe there's some validity to that.
Well, look, California is the 5th largest economy in the world. I remember, they like to brag about that. If it was its own country, it'd be the 5th largest economy in the world. It is the intellectual headquarters of the world in Silicon Valley, and they have a third world energy system that they impose on themselves because they're morons.
Yeah, it's insane that we have electricity rationing going on. It's just in like the hottest temperatures, right? So I was reading another article. This one was from Schellenberger, and he was quoting extensively from Stephen Berberich, who is the president and CEO of California's Independent Systems Operator. And the guy's quotes are really interesting because it seems like this guy is going to give cover for like, wind and solar or the energy system. But he really seems like he's trying to like defend his own job in some of these quotes. So he says, people wonder how he made it through the heat wave of 2006. He says the answer is that there was a lot more energy capacity, generating capacity in 2006 than 2020. I mean, just that alone is ridiculous. He says we have the San Onofre nuclear plant of 2,200 megawatts and a number of other plants totaling thousands of megawatts that aren't there today. It's like, so they're just like over there in California, just like chopping out the legs of their energy production and replacing it with wind and solar. It's crazy to me. It's absolutely crazy. He says the situation could have been avoided. For many years, we have pointed out that there is inadequate supply of electricity from solar has left the peak. We have indicated in filing after filing after filing that procurement needed to be fixed. We have told regulators over and over that more should be contracted for. That was rebuffed, and here we are. So so to translate his kind of like legalese, it was, oh wow, we have a lot of power demand when the sun goes down. Oh no, we don't have enough solar solar doesn't work when the sun goes down. That's basically it. Yeah, and then the state's not going to do anything about it. In fact, the state is moving ahead with plans to remove another 2,200 megawatts of reliable electricity from the grid.
Yep.
It's just like this is, and all of this is in, their Green New Deal-esque mandates to go to 100% renewable energy by, 2045, something like that?
Yeah, all right. But how many, look, I understand people are suffering, millions of people without power, whatever. The real question is, how many polar bears are going to be saved?
Yeah.
How many polar bears? How many sage grouse hens? How many of these animals are going to be saved? Does anyone know?
Do you know, Isaac? One? Two?
Maybe. Hopefully one. Hopefully it was worth it.
Well, doesn't that polar bear's life matter?
if we could save just one polar bear.
If we could save just one. If we could save just one seal slaughtering polar bear. It's all worth it, guys. And so I think we need to look at the bigger picture here. The state of California, who cares?
Well, so
polar bears, yeah.
Their best and brightest minds are on this, okay? So there's some solutions that are being proposed. One is to build a lot more solar and wind so that they can have more, generation, even when it's cloudy. So that seems like a great idea.
That's a good goal.
Number two is create a ton of batteries. So think about all the strip mining that has to be done to get all the lithium needed for that. And they're just going to convince people to use less electricity. So boom, our plans are rolling, man. We got we got solutions for these problems.
They'll convince them to use less electricity by turning it off.
Oh, yeah. Exactly.
Anthony Watts, senior fellow at Heartland, was on the Schilling show, Rob Schilling, out in Charlottesville, Virginia, this week, and he pointed out something as I listened to that I actually hadn't thought of, and that is that the sale of gasoline-powered generators is through the roof. I bet it's actually pretty hard to go to a Home Depot and even find a gas-powered generator because people want to keep their darn lights on, they want to keep their fridge going, and they want their life to continue. And of course, Isaac, you would know, what is the net effect of that? More CO2 released into the atmosphere, dirtier than if it was just taken by traditional means through a power plant. This is the Green New Deal applied to California as a preview for what it's going to be like everywhere in the country if the Green New Deal any aspect of it becomes
not even close, Jim.
This is a third. This is like a third.
This is a third. Like, I agree with the concept and I agree with the messaging, Jim, but like, this is just like, this is the preview to the preview. Yeah. Like, this is
not even an hors d'oeuvre, this is a amuse-bouche.
Another problem here is
You're so elitist now. It's unbelievable.
Okay, you cut out, so I didn't hear the joke. So I feel like I got left out here. But another problem with California's grid is that they just import power from everybody else. Like they're like, oh, look how green we are. We're like 100% renewable. And then they're buying like 80% of their power from New Mexico or Arizona or Nevada. Those aren't the real numbers. I'd have to look them up. But they import a substantial amount of their power. So like they're able to cook their books when it comes to how renewable they are. But the problem here was Arizona was like, oh, it's hot, we're keeping our power. And Nevada did the same thing. So they weren't able to just leech off like productive states that are less crazy when it comes to energy policy. We won't have that with the Green New Deal, buddy. Everybody's going to be dealing with this stuff.
They'll be buying it from Mexico.
How crazy
Mexico will have 1,000 coal-fired power plants on the border, and they'll just be shipping that stuff into the United States. There'll be power lines everywhere going across that border.
There's going to be like entire aircraft carriers that get converted into like coal plants floating off the coast.
Yeah. There you go.
I just a point of fact for the facts here. I just looked it up. Wall Street Journal editorial on this today. In normal times, California imports about 15% of its energy. But then, of course, the Golden State's neighbors are also experiencing heat waves, and they've had to, pretty much keep their power going to their own residents. But the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power draws nearly 20% of its electricity from out-of-state coal.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, Jim, what you were talking about, the diesel generators, in one of these articles that I have here, it said that now faced with electricity supply crisis, Governor Newsom has suspended air pollution regulations, which may increase the use of diesel generators and worsen air pollution in the inner city. So it's just like, it's a disaster, man.
It's funny because you can't take a diesel generator from somewhere else, like Texas or Arizona, and take it into California because California's like specific air regs. Like they're not California Air Resources Board certified. So like there's going to be a lot of like bootlegging of like electricity generators into the state.
Well,
you could buy those from Mexico too. That sounds great.
Sure you can.
We've got
tequila.
Yeah, we've we've got a strong commitment on the show to the slaughtering of whales.
Well, that's true. That's true.
We do.
Yeah. And so I want to know, when do we shift back to whale oil?
Yeah.
When does it happen? Because you know what? It is
technically
by their standards.
Technically, it is. So I mean, at what point it's so incredibly insane. And the thing about it that is truly astounding is that this is just a fraction of the United States. And then when you look at the whole world, it's just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. We would have to do this insane plan. We would have to scale it up and then do it all across the United States and then all across the world for this to matter at all. And the idea that we're going to do that is obviously ridiculous. Even if you could commit all of these liberal countries to do this in Europe and even here in the United States or whatever, if you could convince them all, it doesn't matter. China and India and all those places, they are never, ever, ever, ever going along with this. Because if you have these kinds of problems in India, like thousands of people die. That's what happens. Well, they're not going to do that there.
Well, that brings up another point that goes directly to Isaac, or at least affects Isaac directly up in Minnesota, which is like, okay, California, they have to sweat a little bit as the power goes out. What happens if you have these same systems in place in Minnesota and there's peak energy demand in the middle of the winter? You're going to shut people's power off when they potentially freeze to death?
Yeah, so this almost happened in 2019. We had a polar vortex, and most people don't realize that wind turbines can't spin at like negative 23 degrees. They just shut down for their own like safety. Otherwise, they'll break. And they actually draw power from the grid to heat themselves, to keep the oil in the gearboxes from freezing.
They're leeches. They're energy leeches.
They become leeches and net takers on the system when you need the energy the most. And Excel Energy said, there was too much snow on our solar panels. And like, there's a great article from it's IPS Solar, Ralph Jacobson. And like they hate it whenever I mention this. Like they always email me whenever I mention his name, so I make a point to mention it. But they basically said it's too expensive to clear snow off of solar panels. It's too expensive to pay somebody to do it.
Yeah, nobody thought about that problem in Minnesota.
In Minnesota.
Yeah,
Minnesota.
No one thought about that. You know, I was talking to Donnie about this earlier on the phone. It's like, you know, think about cities like Minneapolis, think about Chicago, all these places. If you were to have this kind of problem in the city like that, what are people supposed to do? Other than freeze to death. I mean, what are they supposed to do? It's not like you can go in Chicago and walk outside and chop down a tree and throw it in your, you know, your wood stove or something. They don't have that in Chicago.
Put on a sweater.
You know, well, yeah, okay, that's not going to help. I lived in Chicago, Isaac. You know, you live in Minnesota. You can throw on all the sweaters you want, man. When it's 0 degrees outside, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And
well,
so what are those people supposed to do? What do they do? Die? Is that the plan? I mean, I just don't get it.
They got to build 1 billion batteries. So there was another part of this article that I wanted to point out. It talks about how one of the largest lithium battery storage centers in the world is in Escondido, California. It can only store enough power to service 24,000 of California's 13 million households, and it can only do so for 4 hours. So I was kind of doing the math on that. It's so less than 0.2% of California households would be able to get this energy for 4 hours, or if you want to ration that out a little bit more, 4.4% of California households for 10 minutes. But, you know, this is California, right? It's communist California. You can't just let some people have the wealth and others not. So we have to spread it out evenly across the 13 million households. So that lithium battery storage center would be able to run every single house in California for about 20 seconds. So that's that's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's not bad start.
Escondido is down there in San Diego County. I'm familiar with Southern California. I lived out there for 6 years, but there's 150,000 people live in Escondido. So they couldn't the largest lithium battery storage station in the country could only by your calculations there, Donnie, could only do about a fifth of its population for about 20 minutes.
Yeah,
and then they got to recharge them all again because they'll be out of power. And where do you get that power from?
This is the issue that the left cares so much about. Like, this is one of their top issues.
Yeah,
and they're totally clueless.
Well, see, this
is
is
they can't even keep the lights on. Like,
this is
climate change is an existential crisis, and then their policies lead to an existential crisis where everyone's like, "Oh no, turn off your power!" Like,
right?
Oh man, but this is it. This is their issue. They're smarter than everybody else when it comes to energy policy.
Well, here, Isaac, I have a specific question for you, because there's another article that I was reading here. This is a Heartland one titled, "Thanks to Green Energy Mandates, California's electric grid is near collapse." And one of the quotes here, I think this is from that same Stephen Berberich. He says that you are trading a loss of 3,000 megawatts for the collapse of the entire system of California and perhaps the entire West. When you're at the very edge and you have a contingency and you have no operating reserves, you risk entire system collapse. So what is that? What does entire system collapse mean? Does that mean just like not just 2 million people, but like the entire state?
Yeah, that means the whole kit and caboodle. That's why they have to do the rolling blackouts.
What a disaster, man! What an absolute disaster this is.
It is.
And again, this is relatively small scale, as you corrected me on that the other day. And it's like, you know, it seems as if none of the positives of these green schemes ever come even close to fruition. It is nothing but an endless parade of unintended bad consequences. And it's every single time it's tried and it has to scale up, this is what happens. And I wonder if, you know, maybe Justin has some insight on this, as paying attention to the left very closely. It's like, sometimes I think they can't not know this. Gavin Newsom was told that the demand on the grid was going to be so high because of the heat wave, and it said he had to announce rolling blackouts. These things have to happen. He has to understand that we don't have the battery capacity, that the wind doesn't always blow, that solar panels are useless at night, obviously, or when it's cloudy, which is what's been happening. And so they have to know that this can't work. But they have invested so much. They've invested so much of their personal heart and their political capital into this that they actually cannot conceive of backtracking and being realistic and doing what Michael Schellenberger actually says, who is, still, I would think, a man on the left and still considers himself an environmentalist, more mainstream, but go nuclear. If you really care about this stuff, talk to the American people like adults and get the radicals out of your neighborhood, out of your political neighborhood, and say, look, we got to do nuclear. That's the only way. But they have so much invested. I know. How dare I? They have so much invested in this that they feel that politically and personally they just can't retreat anymore. So they'd rather everybody suffer and be brought down because of their pride.
Yeah. So what was your question?
I just think that they're that dumb, Jim.
You really think they're that dumb? You think Gavin Newsom is that dumb?
Yes, I do. I think he's learning though. Like, he said, oh, well, we'll have to sober up about having enough reliable electricity on the grid after this. Like, I think they'll learn their lesson. They'll limp along. They'll learn it poorly. This will probably happen in the future some more.
So maybe this is a glimmer of hope. I don't know. But I was reading another article. This was from the LA Times. And it was talking about like the potential solutions to this crisis. And it was one of the ones that I was kind of scoffing at earlier, build a ton more solar, more batteries and all of that. But like their fourth or fifth solution was not closing down the nuclear power plant that they've been talking about decommissioning. So maybe we're starting to get into the territory of them saying, okay, we don't want it because of potential green sludge or whatever caricatures there are about nuclear power, but we might have to just, suck it up and run some more nuclear. I don't know.
Like, they're just going to have to be like bludgeoned with the dead fish of their bad choices over and over again. And eventually they'll get the answer right. Like, good on you, California.
See, I totally disagree. I don't think they'll ever get the answer right. And the reason why is because the left is built on the entire left. The entire movement of the left is built on hope and just hopes and dreams. Like, that's it. That's the whole thing. It's hopes and dreams all the way through. It's promises for 10, 15, 20, 30 years into the future. Can't you just, you heard this woman talking about the abolition of society and, the mermaid queen.
Mermaid king queen.
The mermaid
How dare
king,
you?
the mermaid king queen. he/she or they or whatever said very clearly that it's a lack of imagination. That's the problem that we all have, right? You're not imagining enough. This is how the left views everything. They really do believe that they can fix this problem if they just keep trying harder and harder and harder. We can fix it with wind and solar. We can do it. There is a way. And you're a science denier if you disagree with them. And no amount of real world consequences will ever change that, because the whole movement is not built on reality, but built instead on this promise of something happening in the future that anyone who looks at it fairly says that's not possible. What you're talking about is just not even remotely reasonable. And yet they just continue going down that road. Now, the hardcore environmentalists, because the average person walking down the street doesn't know any better, okay? They know nothing about any of this. They're buying into slogans. The average person giving money to Greenpeace and Sierra Club and whatever, they're just buying into slogans. They don't know any better. None of those people know anything. The people who do understand some of this is the environmentalists who actually study this issue very, very closely. Some of them do know the answer to this. And in that group, there are a few different categories. I think you've got the Michael Schellenberger types of the world, who are the more sort of realistic people who are looking at the evidence fairly and are being honest, even when it's not convenient for them. And then you've got the people who are just the shills, who will do anything they possibly can to advance their own, fatten their own wallets and advance their own political agenda and whatever. Okay, that's your Kamala Harris's and Bill McKibbins and people like that. And then you've got people who actually believe, like the Michael Moore type crowd, that really the only solution is let's just get rid of humans. Yeah. Like, that's ultimately the only way to really solve any of these problems. Right. And I think that those are really the three camps of people. And everybody else, just your run-of-the-mill, liberal voter in California, they don't know anything about any of this stuff. They're just listening to the people who they trust, the news outlets they trust, and they're telling them this is all possible, and that anyone who disagrees is a science denier. And so they're going to keep believing it as long as those institutions keep telling them that. I don't know.
Joe Blow voter walking down the street is going to be mad as hell he can't charge his iPhone. Like, that's going to be a real thing. People will move with their feet. Maybe the empty husk of California just slides off into the ocean after everyone else moves to Texas and Nevada. Like, that's potential. Well,
yeah,
Jim said that Babylon Bee article that like Texas devises brilliant plan to lure California businesses, and it's like, come to Texas, we have electricity.
Well, I mean, that there is truth to that, right? I mean, the idea that like residents are going to lose electricity and you know all the stuff that California puts up with anyways, that doesn't seem like the biggest deal to them, I'm sure. But like, I was going to ask you about it, but you already talked about it, which is like our businesses being affected by this.
Oh, yeah.
And even worse, manufacturing is having to shut down for this. You don't think they take this type of stuff into account? Like, if we move over a state, we could actually run 365 days a year instead of having to shut down every once in a while because it's too hot outside.
I emailed the Stanford economist about this, and he's basically been looking at what the cost of the blackouts is. From last year when they were doing it for fire prevention. And it was something like $10 billion. And one of these manufacturing companies, it was like a ceramic company, was looking at moving out of state because that's exactly it. If you don't run all the time, it's hard to make up your volume. So like it's a huge cost. People are looking at ways to put generators on theirs, like in their plants and like they're messing around with hydrogen too, which I think is weird, but like whatever, like people are using diesel fuel to generate their own electricity on site, which is worse for the environment, but that's what happens. Like people are either going to ignore California's regulations that say you can't use your diesel fuel generator, or they're going to get up and leave because they get sick of not having air conditioning.
The citizens of California pay some of the highest taxes in the world, certainly in the United States, and they can't keep the freaking electricity on. They have the electricity grid of like Venezuela, maybe not quite that bad, but you know, this should not be happening, especially with the taxes you pay. Elon Musk is going to build $1 billion factory in Texas. Yeah. That's the amount of revenue, you know, he is the biggest, you know, Calexeter. There's going to be a lot more, not just residents, but industry and other businesses. They just can't, you can't operate this way. You can't pay that kind of money and not have the freaking lights.
Yeah, but what's going to happen is that's all well and good for Elon Musk and all the people who work for Elon. But what's going to happen is, A, they're going to ruin Texas.
Of course.
Just give it enough time. B, and a bunch of other states too. And then drag the rest of America down with them, because once you control Texas and all these other places, we're totally screwed when it comes to the Senate and other things. But then B, the only people left in California are going to be the people who either can't escape or who are okay with all of this nonsense because of, you know, they've bought into the liberal propaganda or whatever, and they're okay with living with this crap. I mean, that's the vast majority of people who are left are going to be in one of those two camps. You'll get people who can't leave because of family or other things like that, of course, but anyone who can leave will leave, but that means the reasonable people are leaving. And so what are you left with is actually a downward spiral. It only gets worse. It's
for
not
California.
Like for California. Well, for everybody, because a lot of these people are going to move to Texas and they're going to ruin Texas, and they're going to move to these other places and they're going to ruin those places too. And so it actually is worse for everybody. It's just terrible.
Well, and I think they're already kind of planning for this, because there is a proposal that I saw. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I just pulled it up here. There's a proposal in California, a new wealth tax that includes an unusual twist. The tax would apply to former residents for 10 years. So you can theoretically have left the state because you were taxed enough already, and you want the lights on to be, or the lights to be on all year. And then they're going to still send you a tax bill after 10 years of you not living in the state underneath this proposal. So
yeah, all those jerks who want their dialysis machine to work all the time.
Yeah, those jerks.
So California isn't trying to build and maintain the greatest infrastructure in the world so that you could attract intellectual capital and industry. No, they're now focused on punishing everybody who wants to leave.
That's what Illinois is going to start doing.
California is East Germany. they are a fiscal East Germany. They're going to punish you and try to keep you in the state by putting punishments if you leave. I can't even imagine that's remotely constitutional. I don't see how you get any nexus on somebody who for 9 years has been living in Arkansas and they lived in California for 3 years. That's nuts.
Yeah. Well, when a state is desperate
like
enough.
Interstate commerce, that'll never fly. That's just like it's poppycock, really.
Yeah,
it's pure malarkey.
Well, when a state gets desperate enough, they start trying anything to salvage, their sinking ship. But yeah, it's absolute craziness. I mean, like, it has gotten some play. Like, I have heard of these California blackouts, although I attribute a lot of that to Isaac Orr, who, if you're not following him on Twitter, he's probably one of the better follows. Might be controversial to say with Mr. Blue Checkmark over here on our top right. But yeah, Isaac Orr, it's your coverage of this that made me aware of it. But it should be something that gets talked about a lot more because, like we were saying, this is the perfect example. California energy rationing is a perfect example to show how unsustainable plans like the Green New Deal or any of these renewable energy mandates are. Like, it's pure and simple. Like, this should be a talking point for conservatives, libertarians, Republicans for the next decades.
It was such a gift. Like, I feel bad for all the folks who had their power cut off, but like they voted for these idiots. Like, they've been asking.
Some of them voted for him.
I mean, it's California, man. Like, the governor started all of this. Like, they voted for Arnold Schwarzenegger to be their governor. You're saying that they don't deserve this?
I don't know.
It's a tumor.
Yeah.
Get in the chopper.
That movie was canceled. I don't know if you were on for that episode.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Look, I think California is a perfect example of what we're going to be seeing throughout the rest of the country if the left takes over Congress and if the left takes over the presidency. This is what we're going to see. It's going to become reality for all of us. It is inevitable. It is going to happen. And if you think that they're not going to do it, then you're not paying attention, because that's what they've been saying for years now, but especially over the past few years in particular, they've made it a key, essential talking point. Virtually every presidential candidate who ran this last time around said that climate change is an existential threat to human civilization and life on Earth. Existential threat means all human beings die. The entire human race gets wiped off the face of the planet, in which case, if they really believe that, if they truly believe that, then yeah, who cares about rolling blackouts? Anything is justifiable. Literally anything. They could do anything to you because of climate change, right? And that is inevitable. That is coming. That's what the mermaid king queen believes. It's coming. It's coming for you. Okay? It is.
Well, I mean, just like, the whole existential threat thing. And we've seen how much they've been able to kind of get away with in terms of like authoritarianism with the whole threat of COVID. So just imagine when it gets hot again in California, like, what's stopping them from declaring an emergency, a climate emergency, and having authoritarian stuff rolled out in response to that? Like, I could totally see them.
Oh, it's going to happen.
Door-to-door people ensuring that you're not overusing your air conditioning in a time of rationing of electricity. Like, that seems
they
totally
threatened to turn off people's like electricity and water if they were having a party during COVID. So it's all coming down the pipeline, man. Like, but people aren't going to put up with that. People will leave if they can leave. Like, that's what's going to happen.
There'd be no place to go if they run Congress and the White House.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah.
Where are you going? Costa Rica? There's no place to go.
Yeah. Belize.
Yeah. We got to set up a new Liberland just out and floating. No, that's what we'll do. We'll create a libertarian utopia that is based around one of those floating energy generation stations, power plants that Isaac was talking about off the coast, and we'll make our living just selling our electricity to California.
Yeah, man, that'd be great.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm gonna move into like the janitor's closet of a nuclear power plant.
Yeah,
I will guarantee have power for the rest of my life. That's right. What I'm looking for.
All right, gentlemen. I think that should about do
Donnie,
it.
you were going to compliment me, so let's do that before
I
we
did compliment you. I talked about how you're the best Twitter follow on the show.
Please clap.
Okay.
And I'm saying that even with a blue check mark over here to my stage.
Yeah,
right.
Justin's Twitter is pretty boring. He's way more fun to listen to on the show.
That's true.
Yeah, well, you know, you don't want to give people too much because
Yeah.
you
But no, that was my compliment to you, Isaac.
Oh, cool.
All
Nice.
right. That should do it for the episode. Audience, thank you for tuning in for this episode of In the Tank Podcast. Catch our show, new show every Friday. If you'd like, you can follow us on Twitter at In the Tank Pod. You can send us your comments, suggestions, questions to the show by emailing us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim, where can the fine people find you? Start off with you today.
You can find me at J Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst for the Heartland Institute on Twitter, and always check out heartland.org.
Justin Haskins, where can the fine people find you?
At Justin T. Haskins on Facebook and Twitter. And let me just say very clearly that when you have a blue check mark,
oh my God,
you don't have to worry about what the non-blue checks think about you,
Andy,
because you're essentially in a whole new.
Thank you. All right, Isaac Orr. Last but not least, where can
I wanted to hear the rest of what Justin had to say.
No.
You can follow me on Twitter at the Fracking Guy.
All right, thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next week.